Hello everyone, long time no see. Welcome our newest little member, Jasper. He's a little milk drunk right now and falling asleep, so I'm hoping he stays asleep or at least calm so I can get this video up. After all, it is about him. It's his birth story, So grab some cozies, a cup of tea, a blanket, and get comfy because this story is a long one. If you have not read my blog posts about Jasper's birth story, then go read them. But they're in two parts because that's how long the story is. And like I mentioned, I decided to sit down and record his birth story because it's just so much easier to tell it like in person than it is to blog about it, because there's just like very like little details that like I can't really like put into the blog post that like kind of like make the story. And I know, like, for me, I rather listen to a story than, like, kind of, like, read about it. You can kind of get a better idea of the experience. So, I figured I would film it for you guys. So, before I start, I just want to quickly note that you guys know how easy my pregnancy was. I feel like I expressed that a lot, and it was very surprising to me because I didn't expect it to go so well. Other than my miscarriage and the hemorrhage in my uterus with him, it went pretty much seamlessly up until his birth. And I also want to just put this out there that this is my experience. It's his birth story. Like, it's gonna be so different from yours if you're expecting, or if you had a baby, or if you're thinking about conceiving. Like, just like every woman's body is different, every pregnancy is different, every birth experience is just as different, if not more. And it's just so funny looking back, hindsight. You can come up with a million like scenarios in your head of how your birth plan or your child's birth could go, and it just will not fall, or it will not go as planned. And if it does go as planned, then kudos to you. I guess consider yourself one of the lucky ones. But I know for me, I did have a strict birth plan, but I wasn't opposed to not following it. There was just certain things that I wanted, for example, delayed bathing, delayed cord clamping, which I did get, but so much the birthing part I was very open-minded with, because in a second everything can change, and you will see that in his birth story, which I will get to in a second. I just wanted to preface this video with all of that. So I know when I shared briefly about my birth plan, a lot of people were like, girl, it's not going to go that way, babies have their own time. 100% yes, I know that, and I wasn't expecting my birth plan to pan out perfectly. It was just simply guidelines and preferences that I wanted. It wasn't necessarily like a concrete plan, obviously, because it didn't even happen. So that's that. Let's get on with the story. On Monday, January 28th, I had my 38-week appointment. So at 36 weeks, you start going to the doctor every week up until you deliver. And the appointments are fairly quick. You have to give a urine sample. They check the baby's heart rate, your blood pressure, and answer any questions if you have any. And then you also can get your cervix checked if you choose, starting at full term, which is 37 weeks. So they're typically like 20-minute appointments, if that. You're pretty much in and out, assuming there's no problem. So that morning, Mark and I were actually babysitting our friend's baby girl, and it was just a normal Monday morning for us. After babysitting, we were going to the doctor's, and when we got there, it took my doctor a couple tries to find Jasper's heart rate or heartbeat, and to me that was normal because at the end of the pregnancy, the baby's just so big that the position they're in, sometimes it's just like a little hard to get it like perfect on the first try. But when she found it, she commented that he was a little mellow and asked me when the last time I felt him move was. And I said to her, I was like, this is going to sound really bad, but I can't tell you when the last time I felt him move was, because, we were babysitting, and I wasn't sitting there paying attention to him moving. And I know anyone who's pregnant or who has had kids may be like, how do you not know if your baby moves? It's such an obvious sensation. And it is. But I guess, just like most things, when you're so used to something happening, when it's like not happening, I guess you don't like take note to it. Like any type of movement in your stomach, you're like, oh, that's a baby moving. And when he's not moving, it's not like one of those things where you think to panic right away, because it's not like they do move 24/7 anyway. So just to clarify that, I'm not a bad mom. So you're also supposed to do like kick counts if they're supposed to move within like 4 to 6 times every hour, and if they don't, that's when you're supposed to call your doctor. And honestly, like, he was moving, I just wasn't paying attention to how many times he was moving in each hour. So anyway, she was like, do you want to be hooked up to the monitor? And I was gonna be like, no, like, I know he's moving, you found his heart rate, I'm like, I'm fine, I don't need to be hooked up. And I think Mark mistaked the monitor as an ultrasound, because he was like, yeah, and got really excited thinking we'd see the baby, because he was like, yeah, let's just do it, because if we get home, you're gonna regret not doing it. My doctor was like, it'll be good for just peace of mind just to check. And I was like, okay, sure, why not? Obviously, the monitor is not an ultrasound. It's just a non-stress test, so it's like the bands on your belly that track the baby's heart rate. So I did that, sat there for about an hour, and they look for the baby's heart rate to be anywhere from like 130 and up at 38 weeks pregnant. His heart rate was at like 120 to 125, which is fine, but it wasn't consistent. So that's what his heart rate was like when he was moving, and it would like dip all the way down to 110. And even though the monitor like showed that his heart rate was increasing and that there was movement, like I didn't feel him move at all. They gave me apple juice, still didn't feel him move. However, the doctor did say like he looks perfect, everything's healthy, but she wanted to schedule me for an ultrasound just to cover all our bases. So obviously that was like exciting, because you typically don't get an ultrasound that late in pregnancy unless something is wrong. So like we were just excited that we got to see him so close before actually meeting him. So we came back, we got the ultrasound, and basically for these ultrasounds, the baby has 30 minutes to show breathing, proper oxygen levels, brain function, movement, make sure my fluid levels are good, all of that. And then they're scored out of 8, but it's only scored in 2, so the baby can only score a 2, 4, 6, or 8 out of 8. And anything that's not 8 out of 8 is just considered failing, because, well, then the baby's showing some type of like issue. So his heart rate actually dropped down to 104 during the ultrasound, and there was no movement. The only movement that we saw was him moving anytime I would shift my body. In a sense, that was kind of like just him repositioning himself and like gravity like bringing him to either side. So he got a 6 out of 8, and I joke and I'm like, our son failed his first test. But no biggie. I thought it was just a fluke, whatever, random day. Sometimes babies, have those, mellow days. So she just said, just come back the next day, tomorrow, Tuesday, for the same test. So fast forward to Tuesday, I came in for another non-stress test, and at this point, like, I wasn't worried. Like, in the back of my mind, I was like, yeah, he isn't moving as much, but, like, again, I've been feeling him move, so I'm not too worried. But then, like, surface level, I was like, something's wrong. Like, maybe something is wrong, but I was just in denial. But yeah, I was also, like, not believing it. Like, I couldn't focus because I kept thinking about it, but at the same time, I'm like, I think I'm just convincing myself that he's not moving. Like, it's one of those things where when you're told that he's not moving, you start believing it. And my mind was just like really playing games on me. So anyway, on Tuesday at the non-stress test, his heart rate was pretty much normal. I was talking to another woman that was getting one done in the room as well. So like from me talking and kind of like moving around, like it got him, like his heart rate up. But like I still actually wouldn't physically feel him move. And again, they were like, he looks great on the monitor, but just like, still come back in for your ultrasound this afternoon. So we went back in again for the ultrasound, same thing. He has 30 minutes to score an 8 out of 8. And although his heart rate looked better, he was still not moving. So I still was like, they're not going to do anything. They're just going to be like, we're not worried. If his heart rate was lower, maybe they would be worried. And I thought we were just going to go home and I'd go into labor when I went into labor. No. My doctor came in the room, and the first thing she said to me was, where are your bags? You need to head to delivery. I immediately lost it and looked at her and said, for real? And she said, yes. And honestly, the conversation was a little bit blurry because I just was sobbing. I had the whole entire office crying with me because I was so upset. Again, I was open to having my birth plan go a different route, but induction was something I truly, 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 truly wanted to avoid. And I wanted to avoid it because I didn't want to put my body into labor when it wasn't ready. Especially if there wasn't like a high risk problem where my life or the baby's life was like really at risk. And I just truly wanted to avoid it unless, something was going to happen to one of us. And at this point, that was not made clear. I was told both myself and the baby were healthy. So to hear that I had to get induced was very hard for me because, like, I take a lot of pride in everything natural. So I knew my body was able to go into labor naturally, and I really wanted that. So to hear it was just very, very upsetting for me. And it was scary because you are forcing your body to do something that it's technically not ready to do. But may be needed for the baby in your life, could be at risk. So the unknown is, I guess, what's really scary. So, she did say she decided to induce, she wanted me to be induced because we were both healthy, and she was afraid that if we just looked past this, tomorrow or in the next week, it could turn to completely something different, and I would have to have an emergency C-section, and she wanted to give me every chance possible to have a natural birth. So I appreciated that. But again, still a hard pill to swallow. So this was around going on 5 p.m. Tuesday night, and she said, head over there, go home, get your bags, eat something, and they'll be expecting you. I said, okay, whatever. I'm going home and cleaning. Yes. Cleaning just eases me, it calms me down, and I just wanted my house clean before I left for a couple days. So we went home, and I cleaned the house real quick, packed our bag, our bags were packed, but grabbed any last minute things I felt like that we needed, and we were on our way. Decided to stop at Target because I needed a toothbrush, and someone told me to get lollipops since you technically can't eat, and ice chips don't really do anything. So I got lollipops, and then I was like, we should, since we didn't eat, we should just bring the food to the hospital. I'm sure there'll be a lot of downtime before everything gets started. So we got a pizza to split and french fries, and we were going to bring it in to eat while we waited. Wrong. First we didn't get to the hospital till 8 because I'm the queen of stalling when I don't want to do something. And they weren't wasting any time. The room was ready, all my information was written on the board. As soon as I walked in, they said, put your gown on, I'm going to come in and take your vitals, get your blood, and get started. And I was just like, what? Can I sit down and take a breath for a second? This is happening so fast, and I was very bitter, very angry, very frustrated, did not want to be there. So I was like, I'm taking my time. If I'm getting induced, I'm making the room how I want it to be. I'm unpacking, I'm getting comfortable, I'm taking my time. So I got my diffuser out, I got everything situated, I got his stuff ready for when he was going to be born, and I just was getting everything prepared. I brought my own gown to wear, so I put that on. She comes in to do my IV and says, your gown the sleeves aren't correct for the IV. And I was like, that makes no sense. The IV goes in your arm. Yes, I have long sleeves on, but I can just push up my sleeve. But at that point, I was just already annoyed at everything that I just was like, okay, whatever. Put the hospital gown on. And then I was like, well, since I have an IV, I'm assuming I can't walk around and everything. And I was like, because I really wasn't planning on just being strapped to the bed. And she's like, well, you're not going to want to walk around. You're going to want to get sleep so you have energy to push tomorrow. Bitch, how am I supposed to sleep when I just got told I was going to get induced 3 hours ago? I have an IV in my wrist, and I was on the monitor again, so I had straps strapped to my belly that were very uncomfortable. And I was in a setting that I wasn't familiar with. How do you think I'm going to sleep? And I literally said that to her, and she asked me if I wanted sleeping medication. Absolutely not. So I also told her that I brought pizza and french fries to eat, and she said I couldn't eat. And I said, well, I'm going to. And she said, was like, well, we prefer you not to eat because if we have to do an emergency C-section, we prefer your stomach to be empty. And she walked out, and I told Mark, I don't care, I'm starving. So she was like, Mark went out and asked her, the nurse, if I could eat, and she's like, well, fine, only until midnight. And I was like, 4 hours, no problem. So, like I said in my blog post, I marched to the beat of my own drum, and I ate. And after I ate, I felt so much better. I think I was just very hungry at the time, and my nerves, obviously. So once I got food in my system, and my vitals were taken, the IV was in, I was on the monitor, I was starting to relax. So then she came in to check my cervix, and they were starting me off with Cervidil. So Cervidil is a medication that goes on a very long piece of paper, essentially, and it's inserted like a tampon, and it goes behind your cervix, and its sole purpose is to soften your cervix to prepare you for labor. And when you get induced, you usually get Pitocin, which that's what puts you into labor, but your cervix in a sense also has to be like softened and ready for labor. So to my understanding, Cervidil is kind of like before Pitocin if it's needed. So I got that, and my cervix was only at a tight 1, and it was still pretty thick. So Cervidil was definitely needed. And she told me, she's like, it's just gonna give you a little bit of cramping. Some women describe it as bad period cramps. And I was like, okay, I'm not worried. And she's like, it may get a little worse as time goes on, but most, women say they're just bad cramps. So I was like, okay, like, whatever. I remember how painful my miscarriage was. Like, I can probably handle this. So I would say sometime between like 2 and 4 a.m., maybe like earlier, the cramps started getting really intense, and I was up all night. I didn't sleep, so it's kind of like a blur because I was in pain and I was tired, but I couldn't get comfortable. So I was like, I couldn't sleep, but definitely I would say between 4 and 6 a.m. they were coming very regular, very painful, getting more and more intense. And I remember her coming in the room and me asking, are these contractions? Because they're very timely and they're getting more intense. And she's like, they're supposed to, but they're probably not contractions. It's just the Cervidil makes you crampy. So I was like, okay, what do I know? I've never had contractions before. Whatever. They're cramps. So by like 6 a.m. I was in pain, and shortly after that she took the Cervidil out, and I was still cramping, and I was only at a tight 2. So the Cervidil in a sense did absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. And at 8 a.m. I was supposed to get Pitocin. But the doctor that was on call, wasn't my provider, she comes in to tell us what we're gonna do, and she's like, I can't give you Pitocin because the Cervidil didn't work, and I don't feel comfortable going through with your induction. Why are you here? She literally said, why are you here? And obviously at this point, stop, Charlie. At this point, my contractions, they were contractions, they weren't cramps. They were coming every 90 seconds, but after each 90-second rest, it was a cluster of 3. So it was literally a contraction with a second rest in between, or a second pause in between, and then a 90-second rest, and then 3 again. And I couldn't lay down. I had to stand up. I was about to be like barfing all over the place. They were that bad. And so I looked at Mark when she asked us what we were doing here, and I was like, you tell her. So he basically told her everything I just told you. And she says, well, we monitored you and the baby all night, and you guys look healthy. Don't feel comfortable inducing you because your body's clearly not ready to go into labor, or else it would be. And what you're experiencing aren't like the contractions. She's like, I can see that you're in a great deal of pain, so I don't think these are real contractions that are dilating you, but she's like, they could turn into that. So she's like, you can either go home and hope they go away and then you'll go into labor in a couple weeks from now, or they won't go away and you'll have to come back, or we can go all in. I'll give you a Foley bulb, which a Foley bulb is essentially a balloon that goes in your cervix and manually dilates you, and break your water. There's no turning back. Or we could do a C-section. She's like, but no matter your option, I feel like it will be turned into an emergency C-section because your body is not ready to go into labor. So I was pissed because I knew that. I 110% knew that. And I was also mad because I was like, well, then why would my doctor induce me? Like, she's been great all up until this point, so why all of a sudden would she just not know what she's doing and induce me? So I was very upset with that and annoyed, and luckily Mark convinced her just to wait a couple hours, see if the contractions turned into real contractions, and go from there. And I'm so glad he convinced her, because they were real contractions and no one believed me. They were real, because like 3 hours after that conversation, she came in and I was now at 4 centimeters, almost 5, and she informed us that his ultrasound scans were sent to the high-risk doctor, and he is the one who saw a problem and wanted to induce me. He found that if Jasper stayed in the womb any longer, his abdomen growth would have been stunted because my body was just too small to allow him to grow any bigger. But we were never told that until at this point in time in the hospital. So while I was relieved that I was actually here for a purpose, a good reason that he had to come out, I was still a little resentful toward, you know, not being told that information the night before getting induced. So that 8 a.m. conversation, in a sense, became null and void at, 11 a.m., Wednesday, January 5th. So after that conversation, she said, if you want an epidural, I'll let you get one, and then in a couple hours or in a little bit, I'll come back and break your water. If not, I'll break it now and things will start to get really intense and we'll have a baby soon. So I looked at Mark, or before I looked at him, I said, give me the epidural. And Mark looks at me and says, no, Devin, that's not what you want. You told me to tell you this. And I said, Mark, shut up. I want the epidural. And he's right. I told him no matter how much pain I'm in, he needs to remind me that I don't want one and that I'll probably regret it afterwards. But that wasn't the case, because my original birth plan of having a natural birth went out the window when I got induced. I feel like if I didn't get induced, I'd be able to handle it a lot better, because not only was the induction itself very intense and painful for me, everything happened so quickly that it was just very traumatic, to be honest. And I have no regrets. Getting the epidural allowed me to enjoy the remainder of my pregnancy, and I felt like a whole different person with it. And I was hoping to be able to sleep, but I think I just was so happy that I wasn't in pain, because the contractions were making me go in and out of consciousness, that, believe it or not, like, I thought I was falling asleep, but I was literally like on the bed, like passing out, because the pain was so bad. So I was just so happy to like feel normal again. And it was funny, or not funny, but it was weird, because you could feel the contractions, but they weren't painful. Which I thought was kind of like neat, because like I knew when I was having one. So yeah, a couple hours later, maybe like 2 hours, she came back and I was 7 centimeters dilated, and she broke my water. And clearly I didn't need Pitocin at this point because I was 7 centimeters and my water was broken and things were progressing naturally at this point. And she had my bed like on an incline, so like gravity would take over and he could go down to like the birth canal and be positioned at where he needed to be, just to make things kind of easier and pick up the pace. And that's kind of when his heart rate started dropping. So started dropping down to like 60s, and I had to be put on oxygen so his heart rate could come back up. And I'd say around 2:30, 3 o'clock, I got to do a practice push, and everything was going so well that the series of practice pushes basically set him up to come out right away. So we had to pause and wait for the doctor because she was in another room delivering another baby, and again, he was just like sitting right there and I could feel all the pressure. It was scary though because again, his heart rate was just very, very low. But before you know it, the doctor came back in, and his head wasn't coming out. And she said, if his heart rate doesn't come back up or if he doesn't come out, whatever comes first, I'm gonna have to get a vacuum. And I looked at her and I said, isn't that bad? And she's like, yeah, so push. I'm like, what doctor, one, speaks to you that way? And two, like I am pushing. So whatever, this part's gonna like get graphic, so if things like this bug you, fast forward or whatever. But she would take her finger and like rim my opening, and to help him, like to help it stretch and help him come out. And next thing you know, you hear like a snapping sound of a rubber band or like a deflated balloon, and blood goes everywhere. And it's on Mark because he was holding my right foot, and I stop in the middle of pushing and I go, did you tear me? And you know, she's like, just keep going. And I'm only sharing this because this is like the real like stuff that happens during labor and delivery. Like, this is the real shit no one talks about, and I'm putting it in my story because it was part of it. It was part of the experience. But like after that, he came right out. He was placed on my chest, and I was in baby heaven, baby bliss, bawling my eyes out. It was amazing. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I got to feel his head as he was crowning, which was like the most wild experience ever. I cried at that too, and but yeah, having him on my chest, like I couldn't believe like what I just had like did for, first of all, and second of all, like that he was actually like here in my arms, like I was holding my son, and like the rush of emotions and obviously like the hormones and everything, it's just crazy. And before I knew it, you know, time passed and I didn't think anything of it, and the doctor's down there doing her thing and what have you, and next thing you know, I hear the nurse go, 28 minutes. And I was like for some reason that just clicked to like pay attention and start asking the doctor questions. And she's like, your placenta has 30 minutes to deliver and it hasn't come out on its own yet. And I was like, well, what happens if it doesn't? Mind you, I was getting it encapsulated. So I was like, oh my goodness, like I wanted to come out. What the hell's going on? And she was like, I'll have to go in myself and try to get it out. And I was like, I am so sorry. And she's like, no, I'm sorry. Are you going to be able to hold your son while I do this? And I was like, well, how painful is it? And she was like, I, can't be the judge of that. And so I was like, okay. Then I had to, give Jasper up to my husband, and, I didn't think anything of it. And before you know it, she starts asking me all these like crazy questions about like prior surgeries, if I've had any, and stuff like that. And it just kind of like was a blur. And then she shouts out like, we're taking her to the OR. And at that second, everyone's running around like busy bees. Like I've never seen so like many, like not so many people, but I've never seen like that amount of craziness. And it was just like whirling around me. Like I literally felt like I was in a movie, but it was just the weirdest experience. Like everything was like started happening so fast again. And she says, I have like a 50% chance of living because of the amount of blood loss I can experience, but I might need a blood transfusion. I'm a high risk for infection, etc., etc. And I am panicking. I started crying. Like my first thought is, I may not come back to my son and my husband. Which naturally that's going to be anyone's first thought, right? And little did I know the nurse was relaying all this information to my husband. I thought he was clueless, so I'm trying to get his attention, like, I'm going to the OR. Like, do you hear the risk of this? Like, I was like, let me see my son. Like, and he brought him over, and just, I'm gonna cry. Getting wheeled away from him, knowing just all the risks that she was throwing at me, but also not knowing what I was going into, having never gotten surgery before, never stepping foot in an OR, was really scary. And it was just one of those like things, like on top of everything that I went through, of course this would happen to me, right? So we get into the OR, and it's nothing like Grey's Anatomy. I was awake for the whole procedure, which I'm thankful for, because it allowed me to go right back into my room with him. And I had, my arms out in a T, strapped down. But basically my hips down were in really, really high stirrup. They were like suspended in a sense from the ceiling, and it was very invasive, that's for sure. My anesthesiologist though, Darren, was pretty cool. He definitely helped keep my cool and kind of talked to me throughout the whole thing. And it was also cool because any type of questions I had, I could just ask as they were doing the surgery. And I'm not gonna like get into all of that in this video, just because it's like that's like a whole story on its own. But it was something that I feel like could have been detected before. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, I'll never know. But there's no way of knowing that they got all of my placenta out. It was attached to my uterine wall, and it was stuck, and anytime she would pull my placenta, my uterus essentially would come with, which left me with a very, very sore abdomen. And it's still pretty tender almost a month later. If, like he jumped on me yesterday, Charlie, and that definitely hurt still. But overall, my biggest concern is everything okay inside of me, and am I going to be able to have children again? Obviously, that's like the first thought that comes to my head, because I just feel like so much damage and like rooting around was done inside of me that you know, it almost feels like everything's just like chopped up into pieces in there. But the surgery lasted about an hour, and before I knew it, I was back in the room with this guy, and I got to nurse him, and I got to shower after the pain meds wore off, because I was numb from like the stomach down, which like I was helpless. I couldn't move any part of my body besides my upper body. But he got his first bath later that night, and the rest is history. We came home Friday, and so we were there from Tuesday night to Friday evening, and you know, we've been home since. We are getting into a groove, getting into a routine, and that's that. That's Jasper's birth story, and as traumatic and unexpected as it was, I would do it all over again in a heartbeat, and he's worth it, and I'm just so happy we're both happy and healthy. And again, I just really want to say that my birth story, my experience, is my own. It's his, and I don't want you comparing it or thinking that's how yours is going to go if you get induced. I know plenty of people that have gotten induced and it literally not, you know, go as crazy as mine was, or, you know, it was even crazier. You just don't know. So keep that in mind, that everyone's story is unique and different. And with that, I'm gonna go, and I hope the story lived up to your expectations, because like I said, it's long, it was crazy. And I will see you guys next video, because I'm definitely not done documenting this journey and this life with our beautiful son. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.